Evening all on Play Chess. Evening all on Play Chess and streaming to YouTube. This is the Kingscrusher radio show. Okay, we're going to carry on looking at the Fischer Spassky match this week. Evening all on Play Chess. Just mute that, pardon me for the echo. So the Fischer Spassky match, we've gone up to game 10. Let's have a look at game 11 now. See what happened. Just making sure my Kabitz's window doesn't seem quite right today on Play Chess, actually, unfortunately. No idea how to fix that. Okay, that's just great. Alright, so anyway, so welcome to another Kingscrusher radio show. In game 11, Spassky playing white. I'll just say hi all, just in case there's any response to that. So he kicked off with e4, and Fischer chose the Sicilian defense, c5. And now we have knight f3, d6. We have an open Sicilian in game 11. d4, c takes, knight takes, knight f6. This is the Najdorf variation, so it's characterized by this a6 move. Okay, and let's have a look at a little bit at live book here, if possible. Actually, am I completely in the wrong thing here? Sorry about this. Hold on a sec. This looks completely wrong. I'm gonna have to stop this for a moment. Broadcasts. Sorry, I have to trim this out of the video. I don't know what on earth I've done. Did I make it private? That looks a lot better. There's a live book, etc. Oh man, sorry, I'm a technical klutz sometimes. I'm just a klutz here. There is a live book now available, and I'll start again on Play Chess. I'm not really sure streaming serious stuff is my cup of tea, actually, but anyway. Start again. So Spassky was white against Fischer in game 11. There is some observers now. This looks a lot more promising. There's at least one observer, and view our observer list. Oh, that's reassuring. On the view menu, there's actually observer list. There's also some other stuff. Analysis board, live book, chess media system. What is chess media system? Oh god, let's turn that off. Okay, I should know all this stuff. Okay, there was a tick box missing for the observer list. So Chesswolf is on Play Chess. Okay, I'm going to start again. We're only 10 minutes in. 5 minutes was because of this TV program I had to watch. Sorry about that. It will be 9:05 officially from now on. I'm going to be changing that. Yes. Welcome to another Kingscrusher radio show. We're going to be looking at the Fischer Spassky match from 1972, game 11. In game 11, Boris Spassky kicked off with e4, and we enter into the Najdorf variation of the Sicilian, which is this a6. Now, in live book here, 1972, bishop g5, I think, has remained very, very popular, but there's also bishop e3. Bishop g5 was played. We have e6, f4, and this is a razor sharp variation, the poison pawn variation. Now if we look what white has essentially done in the poison pawn variation, white has neglected, it seems, b2, and not only that, closed off the bishop from protecting b2. Now the poison pawn is traditionally like a b pawn here, and the main move is actually to challenge that b pawn, and it's disruptive because if white is given 2 extra moves, then queen d2 and castles queenside. You can imagine bishop e7, queen d2 and castles queenside. So overall, bishop e7 is not played as often as this move, which is an interruption move, queen b6. It comes at the cost of, you know, black's piece development on the king side, and blocking in, of course, this bishop. Is sometimes in the Sicilian you'd want to like put pressure on e4, so it's interrupted white's plan. The thing is, it can be offered now as a pawn sacrifice. It's undermining c3, of course, but white in advance can protect the c3 knight and play this move queen d2. This is like razor sharp stuff. Another alternative is knight b3, but the main played move is queen d2. Now apparently Fischer's not really lost that many games in this razor sharp variation. I think he's drawn about 3 and drawn 1 previous to this in his whole history. I mean, this is the sort of stuff I imagine him theoretically staying up nights preparing for, even without computers, to know this kind of stuff inside out. The problem is, in this kind of match, if it's well known that this is one of Fischer's pet systems, there could have been Russian preparation, but it seems on evidence that some of the moves were actually played by Spassky without a gigantic amount of preparation. But let's see, okay, what happens here. Now, again, if knight c6, I think white will just castle queenside and have a comfortable position, a fairly comfortable position. If nothing else, there's going to be pressure on d6, right? If there's exchanges here, it looks awkward. So the critical test is actually to take this poisoned pawn, and inverted commas, it is actually taken. And the most often response now is to kick the queen with rook b1. In fact, we have over 1400 games in live book historically with rook b1. That is the most critical. But there's another interesting alternative here, which lets the queen sit there in the guts of white's position a little bit longer, instead of encouraging it to come to a3. It's this move, knight b3, and it has been played quite a bit as well. So knight b3 simply actually goes back to protect the rook, leaving the queen sitting there in the guts of white's position. So, you know, why do this? This is a really razor sharp thing. Now, let's put on a basic kibitzer as well. Okay, in this position, white is threatening to take and maybe try and trap the queen. Just as an example, what's the venom behind this? Why is there an urgency? This is a key question. Why is there an urgency for black to play queen a3? Well, let's just imagine bishop e7, a3, and then what do you do with black? Do you start panicking after a3? Can you see what white would be threatening here with this move a3? It seals off the a3 square. Can you see, if I asked you what is white's threat, this is a variation, what is white's threat, if I give you 20 seconds to work out what is white actually threatening here after the move a3. Do you know what the principal threat is? It seems I'm answering my own question properly, because I thought there was another separate threat, but maybe it's not the principal threat, because black has, you know, his own resources. The principal threat to do with the black queen here, I'm glad a lot of you are saying this after this question. You're saying rook a2, but you know, in chess, yeah, one gets away with things. Yeah, one tries to progress like the rating system and thinks one has the illusion one is winning games, but there's no independence of the strength of the opponent. And this is a classic example here that it would seem intuitively that the move rook a2 would win the queen, but actually that's not the principal threat in this position, and quite a few of you have said rook a2. I suspect there's a problem with rook a2. Let's imagine castles, rook a2. No, it is actually a good move. I thought there might be knight takes e4, but of course it doesn't matter. That's still winning for white technically, but there might even be a stronger thing though. Just be aware of these resources like knight takes. Knight a4 is apparently even stronger. I think there's a reason here. This is just a slight improvement. Okay, no, I'll give you points for rook a2. Rook a2, yes, I'm convinced now, is also pretty strong in this position as an example. Okay, it's pretty strong. There's also knight a4. So we've hemmed in that queen, we've trapped it. So either knight a4 or rook a2. Yeah, the knights are holding all the key squares. That's a threat as well. Alright, so okay, there's urgency here to play queen a3 to stop this a3 move. So this is the most frequently played move, a3. There's over 300 games here. And now bishop takes f6, g takes f6, and now bishop e2. All this is very well trodden opening theory in the poison pawn variation. Now there's two key moves here, either h5 or knight c6. h5 was chosen by Fischer here. Slightly less popular than knight c6. We'll carry on. White castled. Now here there's a couple of major branches. Often players with black have played knight d7, but there's also knight c6. Knight c6 was chosen by Fischer, and they're both actually technically meant to be equal in live book. Now king h1, again really well trodden stuff. And in this position, yeah, it looks as though black's development is awkward, but bishop d7 is most often played. Now here it starts to get a little bit interesting in this particular position. Very well trodden territory. There's two key moves it seems here for white to consider. One is knight d1. There's like 21 games in my book, but there's also what Spassky played, which I've heard that he kind of made up during the game. I find that difficult to believe actually. Without preparation. In this position, instead of knight d1, we have knight b1, which I guess invites a repetition already. If black, well, black went to b4, but if he goes to b2, I'm not sure white can exploit this. It probably plays knight c3, and then we have a repetition maybe. It's testing Fischer. Does he want to avoid a repetition? Anyway, so knight b1. So it seems Fischer's like playing for a win here, in a way, because he didn't play queen b2. It seems a plausible move. I don't think the queen's. It doesn't appear as though there's a technical trap for the queen if she goes to b2. Anyway, so the queen goes to b4, and here is where. It seems as though at an intuitive level, with the king tucked away from this dangerous diagonal, at an intuitive level, the king is still in the center here. So can white kind of use this fact and keep the tension going? And to keep the tension going in chess, it's often handy to keep the queens on, and it does seem a very fighting move to keep all the pressure to play this next move, queen e3, which holds on to that e4 pawn as well. Now black has to tread carefully in this position. Various ideas have been suggested by analysts in this position, and this next move is attributed as being a major mistake by Fischer. This next move, move 15. Now what are the challenges facing black here? Well, there is actually an immediate threat to parry in this position. So move 15 is where Fischer's key apparent first blunder occurred. Now, okay, yeah, what is white actually threatening here? Can you see what white is threatening? What if I ask you that? So at move 15, black has to handle something. What is white threatening? What does black have to handle? All right, so make this more concrete. I mean, I can give you a black move. What does white threaten? What does black to move has to handle? A3. It's again threatening to actually trap the queen. A3. You know, if bishop here, not C3, I believe, queen A4, and that uses the square. No, much more dangerous is A3, and then queen A4, and then we've got knight C3, and we've trapped the poor queen again. So black has to handle that threat, and Fischer handles it by playing D5. There appears to be, maybe, with the help of engines, a better way of handling this threat. I mean, this move gives the queen the diagonal, you know, it gives the queen an escape diagonal. If A3 here, but it also, sorry, as well as giving this queen escape, it also pressurizes E4. We simply play actually queen takes E4, forget queen E7, we just take on E4. That's fine as well. So it does two things. It puts more pressure on E4, and it gives the queen an escape diagonal, D5. It turns out also, I mean, maybe a more interesting move, it turns out technically, is knight E7 here. Now, you might wonder why. Okay, knight E7, if A3, queen A4, we've given the queen, we've vacated the C6 square. So if knight C3, we can actually use the C6 square. And it seems, from a technical angle, well, at least from Fritz 13 perspective, but I think other engine analysts have looked at this position with knight E7 instead of D5, and it seems technically, in a theoretical sense, black stands at least okay in this position. I don't know how many of you are aware of this. This is like going through a cult film, to be honest. You know, you can classify films as really good or whatever, but this is like a cult movie, and to know the variations, it seems we're not part of chess history if we don't know these variations. I get that sense that this is important to know, first of all, that this is a position where a blunder occurred. It seems technically a blunder occurred in trying to parry this A3 threat, trying to trap the queen with knight C3, D5. And I want to ask you, just out of interest, how many of you have actually studied this position before? Are you aware of this resource knight E7? I was researching the game a few days ago, and it was in the notes. Someone said about knight E7. So it's vacating the C6 square. It's clever. And black might also be, after a move like that, justifying, you know, bishop D7, because maybe bishop C6 and this diagonal, and that might work with this. It would all start working like clockwork, potentially, you know, across the center to white's king. That would be beautiful. Black will be developing pieces. His king fairly safe, using the H-pawn in conjunction with the bishop. It will be it's a beautiful concept, knight E7. If you follow it up, there's potential in it. How many of you are aware? Sorry, can I ask, just out of purely theoretical interest, how many are aware of this knight E7 in this game as an improvement? Would you just say yes, you were aware, or no, you weren't? Because for me, it's slightly new, to be honest, and it's good to revisit these games. But this is a key point. We go onto a junction here with D5, where black is slightly worse. Yeah, but it seems knight E7, black was okay with knight E7. But it's such a delicate position, this poisoned pawn. You know, the poison has been taken, which is these variations which trap the queen. You know, these variations that trap the queen are the poison of the poisoned pawn, aren't they? Someone is. David, you must be very cultured, because I didn't know this stuff, but we're looking forensically at this game at this point, right? So here it seems Fischer goes wrong anyway. He plays the move d5. So what's wrong with d5? Okay, it's putting immediate pressure on e4. And white, I think, does the best response, which is just to take on d5, which, you know, you might consider, is that naive? Is he falling into black's hands? But I don't think anything else will do here. If white tries to protect e4, then it seems d4. This is quite nice. This is now okay. The queen's got an escape. There's less of a risk of it being trapped. The queen might even be going to c3 next. This is fine for black. So the critical test of d5 is simply it seems just to take the pawn and see what Fischer's got in mind with this. And the idea now, knight e7. So black is wanting to, you know, play a move like knight d5 or knight takes d5 ideally, but the pawn here is simply supported. Now this is one of the better moves, just to support the pawn with c4. Maybe also knight c3 might have been possible. It looks like a loose knight on the c file, but hold on, rook c8. Well, we can support it with rook f5, knight f5. It's okay for white, it seems. White's okay. He might even have some adventurous moves, but this sort of position might be okay. But Spassky's move seems nicer to get the pawns involved here after this knight e7 to play c4, because in principle we want to kind of open up the position, get into the eggshell of black's king safety, you know, crack open the egg. So how do we do that? Well, often we want to lose our pawns to maximize the piece pressure behind the pawns. So c4 looks like an ideal move, and to keep the pressure on black. So it looks like a difficult position now, and of course the knight can then play to c3 maybe later. Also we have a pressure point on e6 with knight d4. So black plays a forcing move here, knight f5, and the queen now just steps delicately to d3. And here it seems a funny scenario, almost, because this is a very, very common thing in especially blitz or bullet chess. If you've ever played with this h-pawn here and the knight here, I think quite a few of us are aware that if you have this scenario with the rook here, you can often try and justify the rook on h8 and the knight here by playing for this contraption, knight g3 check, where you're hoping to open up the h file and have something on this diagonal, so it's actually a mating, you're building up a mating net. But this is a long game, and in a long game, you know, the resolution of resources is much, much greater. It's having like a high def TV compared to a basic TV. So a move like h4 might be okay for blitz chess, but here this is another potentially questionable move, but it is the move that Fischer played, h4. So he's potentially threatening knight g3 check, and this is actually quite a serious threat in this position if it's ignored. As example, let's this knight c3, knight g3 check. Now if takes, opening up the h file, and as I say, this contraption is a great point scorer often in bullet and blitz chess, and here it is pretty dangerous because you're kind of justifying quite a lot of pieces, and this is quite an attacking piece, and this diagonal can be really dangerous. This position is basically lost for white. This particular position here is +5 to black, so there is a very, very serious threat of this contraption being activated with h4. Although tempting, as I say, the longer the game of chess you're playing, you've got to put temptations aside and have ice cold analysis. Is this threat, parryable in an advantageous way to white to avoid activating this rook, to make it less dangerous, less effective? And if so, then you consider, well, definitely in a longer game, its risk factors are magnified, and you don't play it. you play something else. But here, what does black actually play? He played h4, clearly with, you know, this threat knight g3. But what does black actually want to play in this position? It seems a difficult position. The engine suggestion is e takes d5, but slightly better for white here. Not here, because h4 is actually a lot more effective there apparently. But something like knight c3, and it seems white might be, you know, better here. This is a variation, because the king's still in the center. I mean, that's the basic fact of the matter. The king is still in the center here, so it seems dangerous, a very dangerous position indeed. But yeah, the top choice is, it seems, instead of h4, to either take on d5 or even castle queenside. That looks in principle very scary. You're giving yourself quite often a bigger surface area of attack. But here, how does white concretely exploit this? Say knight c3, maybe again h4 is quite effective in this position. So this would require like some precision. But it might, these moves might be better. Either castling or ed might actually be better than what was played, which was h4. There's a very strong resource here in this position, which makes knight g3, it takes a lot of the power out of knight g3 as a contraption here. I wonder if you can guess it, and if you can play this sort of move, then there's this guy on a certain site called Ferrari. You might be able to survive a Ferrari attack. I see he's lethal on bullet. There's other people that are lethal on bullet, but this is the sort of thing you get hacked to death with the faster the time control. But in this position, there is a resource which can parry these combinative threats on this diagonal and sacrificing the knight. Now, if you haven't seen this game, this is a great question. What white play to defend himself? What is a great defensive move and kind of attacking move at the same time? Defend and attack move at the same time. So what sort of move would occur to you here against this knight g3 threat? Have you got any ideas? What would you do against knight g3? It's pretty terrifying stuff, knight g3, isn't it? You know, Fischer's like, you know, got the highest rating on the planet, and he's going to hack you to death basically with this diagonal and this knight and this rook and this pawn. So what do you do here? What do you do in this position? How do you defend this? Okay, we have a variety of suggestions. Let's run through some of them. So I'll give you 5,000 points if you got it right, and like 5,000 minus 5,000 if you choose any other moves, basically. Okay, let's run through them. So if rook f3, maybe minus 5,000 is a bit too harsh actually. Maybe minus 100. Apparently black's a little bit better with bishop c5 here. Still with this threat of mating with knight g3 check now. So occupying this escape exit first. What does white do here? Say this, knight g3. We've got rook takes g3 here. Queen takes, but apparently black is doing okay here. It still seems a little bit scary for black, but once he castles queenside, he's going to be at it again with both rooks on the G and H files. So it's not ideal, but it is an option to sacrifice the exchange. So actually I'm going to give 100 points for that defensive idea if your idea was to sacrifice the exchange. Well done. Rook f3 is an interesting defensive move. Let's have a look at some others. There was a suggestion, someone mentioned h3. Not too many mentioned h3. The thing is, no, this is a big plus for black. Knight g3 check, and we can actually just take the exchange here and probably carry on in attacking veins now. Without that rook defending f4, we can hit f4, and this is actually very nice for black because actually we can torture the f4 pawn here. And in fact, how does white actually even defend f4? He seems to be collapsing. In fact, the position seems to be collapsing. Black's going to be casting queenside, and this is not looking too hot. There's going to be moves like this or this, and it's going to be nasty. So that doesn't help too much, but it's an interesting defensive idea. H3, so rook f3. Now queen h3 was also mentioned. I'm not sure this. Okay, this is interesting for a different reason. Not knight g3 check. Now, if you had the ingenuity of knight g3 check being handled with hg, yes, 50 points, very good, because you've used the pin. The thing is, black can change track here. Doesn't have to use this path anymore. He can exploit the fact that the queen is now in a vulnerable spot and play e takes d5 with the threat of knight g3 check to win the queen. So e takes d5 basically embarrasses this move choice, e takes d, because you're threatening knight g3 check. So what does white do here? He's in big trouble. White's in big trouble here. No, Spassky finds a brilliant defensive move. So give yourself 1,000 points if you haven't seen this game before. Maybe 200 if you have seen this game before. He plays a brilliant defensive move against h4, which does kind of make like h4 look dubious. So he plays actually the move bishop g4. So why is bishop g4 so powerful? Well, it's attacking. It's actually threatening bishop takes f5. And if knight g3, this wasn't played knight g3, if knight g3, we can just take this and we can put our bishop here. And this isn't so bad. How does black actually continue the attack with this bishop here? The king is not going onto this diagonal. Remember, black is the one with the dark square bishop. The opponent with the dark square bishop, and you haven't got a dark square bishop, and you've got loads of dark square weaknesses, you really don't want your king visiting dark squares of the chessboard. So avoiding the king visiting this diagonal is a good idea. If you can avoid that diagonal, very good idea. Bishop h3 here. If e takes d, trying to crack white open. Apparently this is okay. You know, we can take, if we take here, we've got king g2, and we've got a carnivorous king effect, I believe here. You know, rook h2, we're just going to take on g3, and so what? We're going to say, so what? Where's your attack? Where's your attack? There's nothing. The attack's gone. We're just material up. We're going to play queen e4 check. So this position, apparently, this is safe, fairly safe. This position, the rook is repelled. There's nothing going on. So it seems bishop. This idea is defending against knight g3, so much so that Fischer doesn't play knight g3 here. He changes tact against this move. He plays knight d6 in this position. Knight d6, threatening something else entirely. Queen takes c4. So that's the major threat now. Queen takes c4. Now the c4 pawn, maybe for that and other considerations and just general development and trying to get the rooks connected, we see knight 1 to d2, protecting things. And white is actually, with this, now also threatening again to torture the queen with a3. And especially sensitive now is c5, because the knight's now on d6, so that will be winning material. So a3, and if this is annoying. This is very, very annoying, this a3 move in this position. Just to show how annoying, you might think, well, the queen doesn't have to go back to b6. Well, let's just test that. Say Fischer castles in this position, a3. Okay, so if queen b6, we've got c5. So that leaves queen a4 here. This is an kind of only move scenarios with these queens nearly trapped. Knight c5, hitting the queen. Queen a5. This is just much better for white, smashing through this diagonal. That's why this is defensive and attacking. When you align pieces either to the center or to the opponent's king, there's a certain amount of logic to it. That's great intuition when we visually align our pieces, either with central control in mind or with alignment to the opponent's king. It often works out for the best. Because, you know, if you think about it, you're aligning pieces to the opponent's king. You're creating absolute pins quite often. There's an absolute pin potential on e6. There's pressure on that diagonal. Black is without the light square bishop. This is a very nasty position now. Say f5. This is just a really good position. I think we can do all sorts here. This is a disaster. Pardon me. It's a disaster if black does that. If it takes, we smash through the diagonal. So this is a really tricky situation after bishop g4. Black's really being put on the critical list for surviving this position in this configuration here. And he probably plays one of the best moves available, actually, to keep things running quickly. Fischer actually plays a forcing move, as a similarly useful forcing move, trying to blot out the bishop from the diagonal. But even so, in this position still, the queen is harassed with a3. We have queen b6. Now, if queen a4, I don't think this really helps, actually, because of this aforementioned knight c5. Where is the queen going now? Where's the queen going now? Now we just play knight takes d7. And does it help that we've got fg? Probably not. This position is pretty crushing as well. Check. We can take here. It's horrible with the king in the center. White's just stripping bare black's king soon with d takes and putting a rook on the e file. So this is a very, very precarious position already. It seems, you know, bishop g4 has put black on the critical list. Now with f5, there's also this these rooks technically are loose pieces. It also creates, remember, this diagonal is now activated with f5. When a pawn moves like that, there's diagonals being opened up. So it's an especially loose piece, looser, you could argue, than the a8 rook, because there's more avenues for exploiting that looseness. This diagonal now after f5. Okay, yeah, a3, queen b6 was played here, seemingly walking straight into c5. Yes, this is pretty bad. Technically, basically at move 22, this position is lost. Fischer's lost. This is the first time he's lost, historically it seems, in the poison pawn variation, unless someone wants to correct me. Is that correct? This game is pretty losing. I think it was historically his only... oh dear, spoiler alert. He might lose this game, pardon me. It looks to be a very losing position, this position. I'm not saying 100% he lost. It looks to be like a busted position. Okay, so after c5, yes, his queen and knight are fault. It looks pretty diabolical. It does. But isn't there a counter resource here? Because the queen could be attacked. So we have queen b5. But guess what? What does white play here? So white to play another great move, the most powerful move available on the board, exploiting something from earlier that I mentioned. So what does white play in this position? A clinical, punishing move in this position. Move 23. White to play. He still has some work to do. Although I might have said this position is busted for black, white has to play accurately here. His queen's, white's queen's attacked, and the bishop's attacked. So what would you play here? Oh, sorry, I'm just going to have to... Okay, alright, white plays in this position, queen c3, hitting the h8 rook. So his bishop's hanging, but he's hitting that rook, and it's very, very difficult for black here. we see black, yeah, he's in incredible difficulty. If he plays a move like rook g8, white's significantly better after a move like knight d4 hitting the queen. Where does the queen actually go? If queen a4, d takes, it's like slaughter time. Black's just getting slaughtered. Knight takes, check, this is just slaughter time. The king's still stuck in the centre and is paying a big price. So even if the queen's not getting trapped, this position is gigantic pressure with the king in the centre and all the white pieces converging. So that is not too playable to play rook g8 to move away from that threat. Fischer actually chose f takes g4 here, but there was another threat in this position. It wasn't just this. There was actually two threats, or at least two or more, and the other threat is played out, which is not actually to take the rook. That's not the greatest punishment. No. Can you see what white's play here? Can you see what white is doing? So it might not be taking rook, or might. So what does he do? White's play here. What has changed in the position to make another threat more powerful? By the way, I'm going to have to change the sound on Play Chess. So I'm just going to... Great, I'm just going to do something for a sec. Just going to save something here. Because apparently the sound is not working. I'm loading something. Just be back. Just hold on a sec on YouTube for a minute. Yeah, it will actually be a literal minute. Apparently I didn't set up the sound correctly, like a putz, technical putz. So you're saying at the moment f5 is a threat. No, you've got another threat here. If you look at this position carefully, you've got another sort of major threat here, as well as queen takes h8. There's a lot of other tempting stuff, I must admit, like taking the knight. Yes, I know a lot of that is tempting. Taking the rook. Let's just now why wasn't this? Sound okay now on Play Chess? I haven't really done a fantastic broadcast for Play Chess tonight because the sound's been off. Sound okay now on Play Chess? Right. I haven't really done a fantastic broadcast for Play Chess tonight because the sound's been off. Oh dear. Testing. No, I think I messed that up big time. Testing. Testing 1 2 3. Why is this not working? Sound test. No idea. Okay. The threat is actually a4 here, and that's carried out just to trap the queen. a4, forget about the rook. The queen is trapped with a4. So it's a pretty terminal position at move 24. Fischer's actually being done over. He's got a knight attacked, his queen's attacked, his rook's attacked. He's got 3 things attacked. He is temporarily on the good side. Yeah, this is bad news. The good news is a piece up. The bad news, he's got 3 pieces attacked. I don't know if you've seen like the two Ronnies. They said the good and bad news. Yeah, so there's 3 pieces attacked here, but in particular the most expensive piece, the queen, appears trapped. Unless she's going to take on f1. That's actually given us an engine choice here. The third strongest engine choice is to take this rook, grab as much material as possible. I think Fischer must have felt his position is pretty busted here. I I'm not sure, you know, queen takes f1 offers that much salvation in this position. We can have a quick look at it. Fischer's move is curious, it's h3, but let's have a look, trying to grab material. And what do? We've still got then 2 pieces attacked. This is the beauty of having 3 things attacked. Even if one sacrifices, you've still got this kind of double attack. What does black do here? He wants to lose the rook, we just take the rook. Wants to move the rook, we just take the knight. Right? Or even better, we might take first on e6. It's destructive. There's no point in playing queen takes f1 basically. There's too much material loss. Black tries h3 as though this rook activation is meaningful. Is it? Well, Spassky just takes the queen. So is this a brilliant queen sack? Let's see. H takes g. I think white can, well, white does best to take the pawn, otherwise it's going to gobble the rook. But where's the attack now? Black tries rook h3. Okay, he's threatening the queen. The queen just moves to f6 now. So it's kind of strangling the king across that diagonal. And you might think, well, hold on, isn't there bishop e7 or something? Then move the knight. Well, actually, knight f5 was tried. If bishop e7, here, queen g7, and now what? This is a bad position, because we get this nasty pin instead on f8, and then we can start crashing through with a move like c6. And this position, it's just murder. It's just murderous. This position here, or just knight e4. It's just murderous for this pin. Black's really has not got a successful opening position. Basically, his king's still in the center. His pieces are at bay. There's no real attack. Yeah, to be avoided. It's busted, the position anyway. It's completely busted by this point. So black tries knight f5. Yeah, he doesn't bother with bishop e7. But still, this c6 is really powerful here now. c6. And again, if bishop e7, I think we just... Okay, what do we do? No, we just take that with check. That's not possible. So first, black has to handle this c6. He plays bishop c8. And now white's really just crashing through on the e file. The rook here is not doing anything. So white crashes through on the e file. D takes. Now if bishop takes, well, it's all pretty hopeless. Then there's c takes b. And it doesn't even matter about bishop d5 check, just king g1. Black's not really in a position to mate here. He's just getting done over, and the knight's hanging now. So he plays f takes e6, yes. Rook f e1. There's no point playing something like knight e3. I think we just take that off. There's absolutely no point. Check. And check. We can just pick up this g pawn. It's just falling to bits. So after rook e1 here, we have bishop e7. And now Spassky just crashes through, just rook takes e6. You know, creating that nasty pin on the e7. So black resigned here, Fischer resigned here. After bishop takes e6, queen takes e6. It's pretty hopeless, this position. Now you might want some evidence to see like how hopeless it is. Well, the rook and bishop seem particularly useless here. But let's imagine black played on with knight e3 check. He didn't. King here, b takes. I think we can start picking up material. We just start picking up material. In fact, we're not getting mated here. We've got most of the key like squares and attack covered. If g3, we can just take this. There's no real attack. Yeah, so it was, you know, after this crashing through, yeah, Fischer had enough of this game. He was murdered by Spassky in this game. This is the game Spassky murdered him, and arguably I think the only real loss that Fischer had in the whole match. I mean, that's what many people have said, because you don't want to count like the default wins, but this is the game where Spassky really murdered Fischer. And I think as a consequence of this, Fischer didn't repeat this variation of the Sicilian, this poison pawn variation. It's too risky, it seems. You really need to have high precision moves to be able to survive. I mean, in theory, I always thought the poison pawns looks a bit dubious, you know, with your development lagging and you're holding on from the skin of your teeth trying to get some counterplay somewhere. But yeah, Spassky played brilliantly though, and I think particular game highlights is like against h4, refuting basic h4 with the move bishop g4. There was tension maintaining earlier when he didn't have the queens off, he just played queen e3. So the black queen was in danger. It prompted that major, like, first slippery slope move d5. So it turns out the position might have been playable for black with knight e7 to vacate the c6 square earlier in the game. So, you know, there were points of research in the game from a theoretical point of view. But who in their right minds really, I don't know, is in the mood to play the black side of the Sicilian poison pawn variations? You have to be like a thrill seeker or something, or maybe you get wide awake when you have these hair-raising positions. I do remember having an interesting game though in the Hearts League last season where my queen was nearly trapped for quite a few moves, and we reached like a German like time control move, and a draw was agreed. And I remember thinking, I'm just so lucky. I haven't put that game on YouTube yet, but it's like, you know, when your queen's like nearly trapped, is it worth all the hassle? I don't know about you guys, if it kind of wakes you up, this danger of having your queen trapped for several moves in a row. Psychologically, it's exhausting to keep calculating these variations. So yeah, Fischer went on a slippery slope, so that d5. But it was brilliant the way, you know, it was kind of refuted. With that bishop g4, the central crash through, the queen basically getting trapped in the end. The h8 loose rook appeared as an issue as well. So okay, I'm looking on the questions, I'm looking on the comments. Let's turn off this Fritz engine for a moment. So let's address particular questions. Question time about this game. All right, let's go through some questions. There's not too many people, by the way, on PlayShare, so it's mostly you guys on YouTube at the moment, yeah? So have you got any questions about this game? Do you want me to do a brief review from the start if you missed the start? So what should we do? Should we have a quick review, or do you have any specific questions? Yeah, we'll play back the game, okay? With minimal narrative, right? So it was a classic Sicilian defense, the Najdorf variation, and the poison pawn. I believe Fischer had not lost before in a serious game in the poison pawn variation. So this is a very, very critical variation where it seems, you know, the bishop is neglecting b2. Black tries to pounce on this b2 pawn. It's sacrificed. Is it a poison pawn or not? So it's a fundamental debate. Is the pawn poisoned? Sometimes when you take pawns, you're weakening key squares, you're weakening dart squares. It depends. So it's sort of an emphasis on black's dart square play as well, especially with white giving up the dart square bishop pretty soon. Here, the dart square play, if black can get that dart square bishop working later, then that would be good news. We have white getting his king tucked away safely in the corner, away from one critical diagonal. I remember having a very, very short blitz game recently where I got my knight pinned on this diagonal. So this is a very interesting safety move when you haven't got the dart square bishop, to just tuck your king away. But there's a position here, knight b1, very nifty, psychologically saying, like, you know, do you want to draw or something? And when Fischer refused the draw, you know, queen b2, I don't see there's anything better than knight c3. So Fischer kind of was the one to kind of refuse a draw with queen b4. Now, with you know, from a practical point of view, why not just test it? Is there some draw there? Is there some preparation there? Maybe he thought there was some amazing preparation, but it doesn't seem as though there's anything technically after queen b2 for black to worry about. So we have this move now, queen e3, and this is a tricky position. So the solution, it seems, for a3 and knight c3, the best solution seems to be in this position, knight e7, not what was played. So d5 was played, which many people say is the first kind of little mistake. We have e takes d5, so white's not even a pawn down anymore. Black's trying to get that d5 square for his knight. It's supported c4, but remember black's king's in the centre here, and the queen's also looking at infiltration points on a7. If black castled queenside, you've got the queen visiting a7. You know, blimey, you know, it's dangerous, you know, castling queenside sometimes, quite often. Knight f5, and the queen now goes to d3. And here is where arguably another inaccuracy, this h4. Now ordinarily, as I say, the dark square strategy, black's got the dark square bishop, white hasn't. White's weak on the dark squares. It would seem on the surface this is an entirely logically consistent thing to do, to play h4 to emphasize the dark square play. But as soon as this is played, white's light square play is invigorated with this move bishop g4, and it causes black to completely rethink the knight g3 stuff. And this knight d6 now doesn't help with the queen being potentially trapped. It's another square taken off. It's basically taken off b6 off the list of squares because of c5. So the black's queen's in more mortal danger now than ever before, or at least having the effect of losing material after this knight d6. So we have this knight 1 d2, and simply white is threatening now a3. And if queen b6 c5, and if queen a4 knight c5, with devastating effect, especially with this light square explosion which is about to occur on e6. So black plays f5, creating a loose piece on h8. So we've got several issues now. The queen's lack of available squares, c5 and other ways of trapping the queen with a3 and knight c5, but we've also got this now loose rook on h8. So we have a3, getting the queen away from c3, which can actually hit h8. So technically a weakness of the last move here, away from c3, which hits h8, but also of course going into c5. But now we have this tactical resource queen b5, but now the c3 square is used, and this is just a refutation of black's play. It's a complete refutation of black's play. Black is busted here. This is nearly +4, this position at move 23. Black has been completely busted out of this opening. So Fischer tries f takes g4. It's just hopeless here. He's losing his queen. He doesn't even bother playing queen takes f1. You might think also, hang on, there's a move queen e2 here. Didn't cover this. There is actually an e2 square. Pardon me, pardon me. Let's have a quick look at queen e2. It doesn't help. Rook a e1. And the queen is trapped again here on e2. So this doesn't help. If knight b5 trying to be tricky, then we take on h8. Queen's got d3, but now this is just crashing through here. Okay, variation not covered earlier. Sorry about that. Queen e2 was a space here technically. But no, Fischer played h3. So the queen is taken, and this attack really isn't working, this attack here. Black hasn't got really the pieces to support the rook here. Queen f6, and it's black's king that is caught either in the center or in the center with pinned pieces. So knight f5, and we have white crashing through now that e file, but first playing c6 to squish black's pieces to make sure they've got disconnection issues as well. And now he returns back to the e file. D takes, f takes, and now hitting that e file hard. Rook f e1, and then the exchange sacrifice is entirely grounded in a crushing position. Rook takes e6. End of game. So that was a little quick review there. Does everyone get the game? Do you get this game? Does anyone get this game? If I'd asked you, do you get this game where from 1 to 10, where 1 to 10, 1 is not much, 10 is a lot better at least than before. Is there a score here? Have I described this, I don't know, in a reasonable way, this game? It's a razor sharp game. I mean, it's a lot of variations. Do you get the game a bit more than before? If Fischer didn't play the move h5, so with no h4 plan at all, if Fischer didn't play the move h5, that's the question. Okay. One, not much. All right, let's go back. If Fischer didn't play the move h5. all right, but I think that's a theory move. These positions are so well trodden, right? That's why I'm wondering, This move h5, I think we're in live book territory or something. If we go back to when h5 was played, right? Because that, you might seem that's an anti-positional move, but in these variations, black has the dark square bishop. You might want to use the h6 square. I think you'll find h5 is one of the top moves actually in live book. There's 102 games with this. If he played knight c6, that's actually more popular actually, with 192. This is a good alternative. You're right. I think this is more frequently played nowadays instead of h5. Knight c6. Good point. Whoever said why play h5? Good point. So there's a lot of games in this line. Castles, king h1, rook c8. It's a different ball game completely, this position. Apparently bishop h5 is popular here to stop h5. And it's a totally different ballpark. We're in a completely different surround. In live book, bishop g7 is seen 20 times. Rook f3, castles. Yeah, we've got a completely different game. Yeah, h5, yeah. That is a branch in live book, a major branch. Black either, it seems, historically, has played h5, 102 games, or knight c6, 192 games. Any other questions? I'll give you a few, about 20 seconds, 30 seconds if you want to ask something else. I mean, for me, what concerns me playing the Sicilian defence, now this is a personal question, if I was playing black, this worries me, this variation, because if you want to play the Najdorf, and you're faced with bishop g5 now, what the heck do you do? Do you go into this terrible variation? Because I've had this a lot in Blitz, and I thought, well, what do you do here if you don't want to have this poison pawn stuff? You can play e6 after f4. You can, it seems, you can choose to play bishop e7. You don't have to go pawn hunting. But you get kind of scary positions anyway. You get this sort of scary position instead. And apparently this position here is, it might be, well, the engine thinks it's better for white. It's a dangerous position, but at least you haven't had this kind of indignity of going pawn hunting with your queen. It seems like such a poxy thing to do to try and win the b2 pawn with your queen. This is an alternative. There's been 1,000 games in this position, nearly, with bishop takes f6. Now the usual response is knight takes. Here, this is a well-trodden position as well, by the way. Bishop takes. This is a gambit white plays. Very, very well-trodden position. There's even 69 games here. This is all very, very sharp, razor-sharp stuff. Where apparently white's slightly better here, and the engine has white as slightly better. This is another way to play it. As from a black point of view on this game, theoretically, you don't have to go pawn hunting. You can play the move bishop e7 here. Yeah. So that was my question anyway. I'm going to flip the board again. That was my question, injection here about this, playing black. Why not break on e5 for black? Well, usually when you break on e5 for black, well, where? Hold on a sec. You mean here? There's only 12 games here. Usually you're compromising the d5 square. Now theoretically there's a question mark over this e5 move. Very interesting question. I'm glad you raised it, because yeah, this is a rare move in live book. There's over 10,000 games of e6. There's 1,000 with this. There's about 500 with this, but only 12 games with e5. And that indicates there might be a fundamental problem with e5. And the classic problem with e5 is the d5 square. The specifics of this position, yeah, the e5 square is pretty vulnerable. It seems white has pleasant choices here. Can either take on f6 to weaken d5 control. So this is maybe one positional way of playing it. Also knight d5 immediately here. Knight f5, and it just starts to get a bit nasty looking with these knights on light squares. If black ever takes here, this position is just better for white. I think players with black don't like these positions where they've got this hemmed in bishop and a blockading knight on d5. This is the sort of thing which just wins games. It's almost as if when you get an entrenched knight on d5 like this, it's like a massive positional and attacking advantage. It's a fantastic foundation of your position. It's a knight which is very difficult sometimes to dislodge, and white can take away black's equivalent square here with c3, but that is a very bad structure for black. And in fact, white can even play aggressively like this. Yeah, that's why it's like e5 is not so popular. It's a major structural concession quite often to play e5, that d5 square. You've got to be in a position to be able to battle that d5 square. There are some positions it is playable, but this might not be one of them where it's particularly playable. And also knight f5 immediately is interesting. Takes, I think, again, taking here to weaken d5. We're transposing. We're kind of transposing. We get this position with an entrenched knight on d5. I think that's the short answer, that you don't want to give white this fantastic knight on d5. So, okay, is there any other questions, like theoretically or otherwise? So we have this move. Oh, I've made that the main line or something. e6, queen e6. Does anyone play the poison pawn variation? Has any of you played this poison pawn variation with black? Have you ever won with it if you've played it with black? It's pretty sharp stuff to want to play with black. Okay, alright, if there's no other questions, I'll wait a bit longer for any other questions. You want to ask something else? Or should we carry on next week? A bit too razor sharp maybe Fischer was in this game, a bit too razor sharp. It's like putting the position on a knife edge. Sorry, I'm injecting a question now about this queen b2 business. Is this really the case that after knight b1, I mean, I've said that, but is that really the case that Fischer could have played for a draw when this knight b1 was played with the move queen b2? As I say, Fritz 13, depth 16, it's only giving here knight c3. If another move is played in this position, Fischer might have feared preparation. Let's try a4, stopping the a3 square. Black actually has f5, it seems. I think we've given the queen an escape. We can go to f6. We can play bishop g7 next. And here it starts to look painful for white on the dark squares, in fact. And if knight c3... No, you're kidding me. No. Oh, maybe Fischer was right actually. Oh my god. It seems after knight c3, knight b4. Okay, white is threatening to trap the queen. If we play knight b4, the idea of rook c8 and all the stuff. No. It seems white's better here. Rook a b1. So this position, it seems white's better. Queen d4. and he's going to be threatening the rook and the queen. Is that as safe as I mentioned? This doesn't look safe at all. This queen looks vulnerable and the rook now looks vulnerable. Let's just go back here. Sorry, so I wish I never inserted this question. I thought queen b2 was okay. Forget f5 for a moment. d5 here. This might be the way for black to play. Knight b4. It's razor sharp stuff. Alright, Fischer got his queen out to b4. It's razor sharp stuff with queen b2. It's just such a delicate position. You don't want your queen to be trapped. Alright, see you guys next week. Okay, see you next week. Thanks. Have a good week. It's usually every Tuesday at 9 PM UK time, usually. So next Tuesday, 9 o'clock. If you check the YouTube channel, there should be a link for a stream. 9 PM UK time. Okay. Comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks so much.